Hey, God bless everyone. It's nice to see you out there. As you may have heard, I've been called away to an emergency missions trip at Daytona Beach, Florida. I heard the lifeguards needed to be ministered to, so I'll be giving out some tracts on the beach. Good luck with the snow. Peace. Love you guys. I'll bring you back some sunshine. I know you're all hating me right now. Marie is going to coordinate the activities of class. I think it'll be great. It's going to be awesome. So as you guys are probably aware, the assignment for this week is to go over the reading for the book of Leviticus. So what I'm going to do is a short video specifically to cover some of the readings in the book of Leviticus. Once that's closed out, there's another short video that Maria is going to load up that also supports the readings in Leviticus as well. And then after that, you guys are going to break up into your groups. The groups will be the same groups as last week, same topics as you guys were working on. I thought one of the things that was very important is that you guys get a little bit more time to meet within your groups, especially as it relates to the reflection piece. So I wanted to give you the time to really flesh those things out. It's entirely possible that you've already finished all the writing assignment. As I'd indicated, it was due on February 27th. By the time you're seeing this video, it was yesterday. However, you may have seen also online that I've extended that date. So now I pushed it back for 2 weeks. That's going to give us as a group a little bit more time to work on it. And also, I think what's going to happen is in the session today, as you hear, especially each group reporting out, that's also going to give you a better indication of how you really break down the questions. You know, I talked last week about asking better questions. So we're going to go through the knowledge, which is just the basic portion of scripture that I gave to each of the groups. Some reflection questions so you can get a deeper understanding. And I think ultimately there's a wisdom piece, which is your own personal reflection. And so therefore you could write based on all the other information and the work that you've been doing in the classroom. I did think it's important for every group to report out, and every group should also be interacting and asking questions. There's a great opportunity for you guys to learn from what others in the classroom are doing. One of the other things that remains an option is that if for some reason the assignment that you were given, whatever that was, whether it's crossing the Red Sea or the Ten Commandments, whichever one it was 3 different assignments, maybe that one doesn't personally resonate with you. Maybe you say, oh goodness, if I was in another group, I would have gotten a different topic which would have fit my situation better. Perhaps that's what you're thinking. If that's the case, Maria should have extra copies of the actual rubric for the reflection. So if you would like to write a different reflection, you could do that. So let's get into the book of Leviticus. As I had mentioned last week, when we read the book of Exodus, it primarily tells the story of the coming out of the nation of Israel from the land of Egypt. And one of the things that specifically happens in Exodus chapter 20, God gives the law. It's the 10 Commandments. And I think even if you didn't read that particular portion, you're probably familiar with it. Maybe you saw the movie. Moses goes to the mountain. He gets 10 Commandments. He comes down. This forms the basis of the law. It's a physical icon. The law itself is a covenant. We've been speaking about covenant. The sign of the covenant is the commandments. And the sign of the covenant is like we mentioned last week, is the circumcision. So there's certain things that exemplify and really represent that covenant that God made with Moses. And so what's really important to understand is the 10 Commandments were not all the laws that are in the book of Exodus. If you go and continue to read through the book of Exodus, and if you read especially in the book of Leviticus, the law itself, there's 613 laws. Let that sink in for a second. 613. Okay, you couldn't possibly remember them all, and I think most people have trouble keeping 10, much less 613. I think the thing that's really important to recognize is what happens is God gives the law and the rules in the book of Exodus, and then the purpose of Leviticus is basically support Exodus and to say, now that I've shown you and told you and entered into covenant with you. How do you go about keeping the rules? How do you keep the law? And so what the Leviticus opens with is a series of, it's a description of the different kinds of sacrifices which are required to be made. There's 5 different sacrifices mentioned within the first 7 chapters of the book of Leviticus. And what I've done is, you'll see here a summary of each of those 5, and this chart will also be loaded on classrooms.com. So you don't have to write it down, you don't have to memorize it, but it's important to know that there are different sacrifices for different purposes. Let's go through this real quick. So number 1, you have the burnt offering mentioned in Leviticus chapter 1. And it's an offering of an animal without defect. And the primary purpose is it represents devotion. Again, you're seeing lots of types and shadows. The second kind of sacrifice, which is found in Leviticus chapter 2, is called a grain offering. Grain offering is an offering of flour, oil, or frankincense, and it's an expression of gratitude. Again, you see types and shadows, right? Third type is a peace offering. The third one is a peace offering, which is found in Leviticus chapter 3. And this is an offering of an animal without defect. And what it represents is fellowship with God. The fourth kind is called a sin offering, which is found in Leviticus chapters 4 and 5. And what that represents, it's an animal which is sacrificed. And there's different kinds. It's an animal that's sacrificed, which represents cleansing. And the fifth type of sacrifice is the fifth type of sacrifice is what's called a guilt offering, which is found in Leviticus chapters 5 and 6. And it's this, it's an offering of a ram, and then there's also an act of restitution as well. And what it represents is restoration. So within those 5 different types of offerings, you see devotion, gratitude, fellowship, cleansing, and restoration. It's really important that God, even as soon as he set up the law, 613 rules, he has to make provision when people break the law. Isn't that something? So he says, this is what it takes for you to be righteous in my sight. Lays out the law and says, by the way, knowing that I already know that you can't do it, so I have to set up a system where you can pay for or atone for breaking that same law that I've set up for you. So this becomes critical because, as you'll see in some of the New Testament scriptures, especially in the book of Hebrews, it specifically says that there's certain things that the law was weak and feeble and it could not accomplish. Although the laws themselves were fine, there's nothing wrong with saying, don't set other idols before God, or don't blaspheme God's name, or remember the Sabbath, or do not murder, or do not covet. There's nothing wrong with that, but the reality is they were not able to make you and I righteous in the sight of God. So you have a law in Exodus, you have provision in Leviticus for when we fall short of the law, and that's basically how those 2 books go together. One of the ways that I've heard the book of Leviticus described is it's a handbook for priests. So if you were going to become a Levitical priest, you would probably get something. Let's think of it this way. If you were to start a new job, you typically get a handbook, an employee handbook. They give it to you. It's the rules, it's regulations, it's what's expected of you. It's maybe it answers questions that you might have of your employer. It's the same thing. Book of Leviticus is like a handbook for those who are going to be serving in the tabernacle of God. That's the purpose of it. And so that's why it doesn't read like a narrative. In many places you could say, well, Carlos, this is pretty boring, or it's hard to read, or it's hard to digest. And I totally get that, because it doesn't move along like maybe the book of Exodus or maybe the book of Numbers will. So just keep that in mind. That's why the teaching that I'm doing right now is not that extensive and it's not that long. I think if you get what I'm saying now is an overview for a survey class, that's good enough for the book of Leviticus. Now, one of the pieces that I also gave you in the reading was out of the book of Exodus. So I'm asking you to go back to Exodus, because what we see in the book of Exodus is God giving the instructions for Moses to build a tabernacle, which is very, very critical. In Leviticus, we see the tabernacle at work, but God gives the instructions in the book of Exodus. So if you notice on this chart, by the way, this chart is also on classrooms.com. So you don't need to, it's very small. You don't need feel to the need to take a picture of it or anything. It's there, it's online, it's for you, and you could easily print it out if that's something that's helpful to you. So when God brings the nation of Israel out of Egypt and into the desert, specifically the scripture says that God brings them out so that he can meet with them in the desert. And as you know the story, if you are up on the readings, at Mount Sinai, God meets with his people. This is where the law is given. And what he does for Moses is he sets up a temporary place to meet with Moses and for Moses to meet the needs of the people. At first, it's just a tent. It's called a tent of meeting. It's not apparent to me how big it is. It's not really very big. And it's at this tent where Moses performs sacrifices. And while Moses is working out of the tent of meeting, there's actually a tabernacle that's being built, which is a much larger structure. So the tabernacle itself is probably about 135 feet by about maybe 35, 40 feet. So it's probably about maybe a little bit larger than the room that you're sitting in right now. So you think about the haven. The haven was a little bit longer. That's about the size of the entire tabernacle. Maybe twice the size, 3 times the size. It's not that much bigger. The tabernacle is that big. And that's supposed to meet the needs of the entire nation of Israel. And so there's specific things that have deep spiritual meaning that are part of the tabernacle. So if you look at the handout, so the first thing you're going to find is a basin. It's called a laver, which is wherein the priest would have to do ritual washing to make sure that they were clean and that they can then perform sacrifices on behalf of the people. The second piece of furniture that's there in the tabernacle is the brazen altar. So this is where the animals are actually sacrificed, killed, blood is spilled, and this is where that occurs. Beyond that, then there's a place where they can enter into a place that's called the holy place. So this is a tent that's within the larger tabernacle. Within that tent, there were 3 primary pieces of furniture. There was something called a table of showbread, which is literally just a table with some bread. And that represented God's provision. There's a lampstand, it's called a menorah, and it's got 7 lampstands, 7 lights, 7 candlesticks, and it represents God's light and spirit. And then the last is an altar of incense, which represents prayer and worship. So these 3 pieces of furniture are found once you actually were to enter into the tabernacle. Lastly, within that opening, there's another room which is separated by a curtain, and that place is called the most holy place, or you may have also heard it's called the Holy of Holies. Within the Holy of Holies, there's really only 1 piece of furniture, but it's got 2 pieces to it, and that's the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant is the place where God would physically manifest himself above the 2 angels that are on top. And that Ark of the Covenant also then had a top. It was a gold top, which is called the mercy seat. And the mercy seat represented God's throne of grace. And once a year, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, perform sacrifices on behalf of the entire nation. Only once a year, 1 man can enter into the manifest presence of God to make these sacrifices. So think about it. Today, in 2026, all of us can go into the Holy of Holies, the true Holy of Holies, and experience the manifest presence of God. We could all do it every day. We can do it simultaneously and all be in different places. Like, that's how much better we have it today than they had it back then at the time of the Exodus. So altogether, it was these 7 pieces. Now, what I've done is there's going to be another video that Maria is going to show you. It's very short. It's about 5 minutes, but it's very visual. It's much more visual than just watching me describe some of these things. So I want you to watch this video so you get a better idea of what was actually in the tabernacle. Following that video, Maria is going to lead you back into your groups where you can once again continue the work that you started next week. You can continue to flesh out perhaps your W, which is the wisdom piece, which is your application. This is when you're doing a personal reflection and saying, this is what this particular portion of scripture means to me. This is what it's saying to me. This is what's important to me. And then each of the groups is going to report out. and you're going to report one to another, and everyone should be asking questions. You should get curious because there's a lot that each group can teach the other groups. There's a lot for us to learn. It's also good practice for you how to, like I said before, ask better questions, how to break down scripture, how to get scripture that interprets scripture. And I think hopefully as we go through this process, we'll have more clarity in terms of what these portions of the Old Testament are saying. It might raise new questions, which is fine. Again, as I mentioned before, you might finish this class with more questions than you came into it with, but that's fine. That's the goal. But hopefully it'll be a good learning experience. I'm going to turn it back over to Maria. Thank you so much. God bless you. The lifeguards and the guys on the beach are calling. Got to get out there. Got to put on my bathing suit and hit the waves and do the work of the Lord. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to do it. Afterwards, we'll go over. There's a swim up. There's a swim up bar. I'll order some virgin pina coladas. Minister to the Cabana boys that are there. They're all emaciated. They're just gaunt and they haven't been eating. Got to bring the word to them. You know, if any of you guys want to make donations to support my ministry trip, this missions trip that I'm on, you can do that. You can make your checks payable to Perillo Tours, care of Carlos Rivera. I'll see you guys next week. God bless you.